All right, we're just going to give it a couple seconds here. Still seeing a couple people jump on. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll get started here soon. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. We're really excited for this webinar. Not only do we have two superstars in our current MentorMe class doing the interviewing, but we have MentorMe alum and former CABMA president Omar Banks. Just a little background about the MentorMe program as we are highlighting this program during this webinar. But for those of you who are not familiar, the program is a one-year program, so we're currently in our 24-25 class right now, and applications are open for our 25-26 class that will kick off next June. But it's a one-year program that pairs an experienced athletic business professional, so a first-line mentor, with an emerging professional, which we call a protege. So we talk about career and personal growth as well as getting involved more in CABMA. So like I said, applications are currently open until December 15th. So if you are currently interested in applying for our next class, please go to the website that I'll drop here in the chat soon. We're open for everyone to be a mentor or a protege, depending on where you are in your career. So now on to the fun stuff and why everyone is here to hear from Omar Banks. I know I'm just as excited as everybody else. Omar is currently the Deputy Athletics Director, Chief Financial Officer at West Virginia University. He brings over 25 years of leadership experience in athletic administration, including stops at Campbell University, Virginia Tech, Cincinnati, Hampton, and VCU. Like I said when I started this call, we will feature one of our current pairs, so Kyle Ray and Abraham Wade. Kyle Ray is the Associate Athletics Director for Business Administration at the University of Virginia, with previous stops at Towson University, among other institutions. He currently oversees financial reporting, budgeting, procurement, and travel logistics for all sports teams. He is a dedicated mentor in the CABMA MentorMe program and helps others navigate athletics administration and finance. Abraham Wade is currently the Assistant Director of Business and Finance at UCF. He has a UCF MBA and a Master's in Sport Business Management. So I'm going to stop talking here, kick it over to Kyle, and get us ready for this great conversation that we're going to have with Omar.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks everybody for being here today. Really just want to give a brief shout out to both Caitlin and Tiffany Howard from the MentorMe exec team and everything that they've done to put this together and getting this group here. As Caitlin said, we've got a good group and we're excited to kick it off. And how we're going to kind of go through this is we'll go through and kind of have a conversation with Omar, ask some questions back and forth on conflict resolution and how Omar has dealt with that in his career path, and then talk a little bit about even myself and Abe through our MentorMe relationship, how that has impacted that, and some of our conversations that we've had talking about career journeys. So to kick it off, Omar, first and foremost, good to see you. Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mr. Ray. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here. Glad to be here. Hello to everyone that's on the call.
Excellent, excellent. So when you think about conflict resolution, what comes to mind? How do you define conflict resolution so far in your career?
Okay, and just so I just want to be clear, so if you look at me and doesn't look like I'm looking at the screen, I have like a huge monitor. My camera is up here, but my tiles are down here. So I'm actually looking at my tiles. So but when I think about conflict management, there's a lot of things that can run through your head. I think the biggest thing for me over my career, you have to learn how to basically manage the conflicts constructively. You want to minimize any relational damage, and you want to have positive outcomes as a result. And so that entails a lot of, self reflection on yourself, because you don't want to take things personally, knowing that we are in a very high pressure business. But at the end of the day, you want to be dispassionate, keep your emotions out of it, and make decisions that are in the best interest of the department and the university. And so from my perspective, you want to solve the problems constructively. You want to minimize any damage, and you want to enforce positive outcomes as a result.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point and insight there. I think one of the things you started to touch on, especially for you and your experience so far in this field, is maybe how that mindset and your approach has evolved over time. So could you talk to us a little bit about, when you're someone who's potentially a middle manager, someone who is made it to exec staff versus when you're the AD, right? How has your approach and mindset evolved as you've been in different seats?
So a very interesting question, but a very good one, because not only have I been at an entry level, I've also been middle manager, I've been senior staff, I've been athletic director. And throughout all of those experiences, one of the things that I've learned about myself is I am a problem solver and I know how to resolve conflicts. At least that I like to believe that. I'm still around after 20 plus years. And so as I developed my leadership style, you work with different people you report to, and you also take on and embody the vision and values of your athletic director or your leader, your president. And so as a result, I learned throughout my career two things. I learned what to do and I learned what not to do. And I took those things which I know were good to do, and I tried to incorporate them into my value set. So as I moved up the ladder, you want to treat people like you want to be treated. You want, fair wages for a fair day's work, things like that. So I've always tried to make sure I take care of the people that work underneath me. And I've also learned how to advocate for myself, and this is where the conflict management comes in, because sometimes people don't feel like they know how to advocate for themselves. But again, it's not emotional, it's more dispassionate and what is in the best interest of your department. And so a lot of you that are out here will probably get recruited to go other places. If it's really about money, then you're getting paid more in another place, then, that's your prerogative. You can do that. However, if you really enjoy the culture and the people that you work with, and you believe that you're having an impact on your department, it's not because you've always done everything that everybody says. There has to be some conflict, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. But there are two main strategies that I like to work with when you feel a conflict coming on, as to how to best approach it and handle it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful context as well. And I know that's something that you kind of touched on there, thinking back to conversations over the past year that Abe and myself have had about, some of the career progression and and you just said, being an advocate for yourself, right? I think you have to know where you're at in your career path and be really good in the seat that you're in, but knowing that at the end of the day, if you're not able to effectively communicate to your manager and have candid and direct conversations about what your career goals and aspirations are, maybe it's not even on their mind, right? We're all busy. This, like you said, this is a high pressure industry that we're in with a lot on everybody's plate. Like sometimes you need to be able to stop and say, hey, remember me here and like what I'm trying to accomplish. Because that's really important, especially when it's someone who's a manager of people. And so thinking about that, Omar, like what are some of the key things when you think about effective communication, candid, direct conversations when it comes to conflict resolution? What have you prioritized there?
So this great question leads right into the two things that I really wanted to hit on. And so two things that I've learned throughout my career. Um, a lot of us are business managers. Some of us may not be business managers that are on the call. However, two things that I found that work very, very well for me. Number one is active listening. So you don't want to try to talk over someone so your opinion can be heard. What you want to do is actively listen to what the person is saying. So a lot of times when I have a coach that's in my office and they're advocating for something, um, I listen to them and I try to get from them, why do you need this? It's not in your budget. You didn't put it in your budget plan. So how do you want to handle this? You just want me to give you $100,000? Not going to happen. However, we sit down and we listen. I hear what they say. I repeat back what they say, and then I try to make sure that we have an understanding of, this is what you're saying about what your needs are. This is what I'm saying about what your budget can support. And here's what I'm saying about what I'm able to do from the CFO chair. Now, we can agree that we can't do anything. So I like to say we can agree to disagree. but at least we both heard each other and we both feel respected, and that we left with an understanding of what this coach wants and what I'm looking to do for them. So a lot of times we come up with medium to longer term solutions in order to handle some of these issues. But at the end of the day, active listening is one thing that I try to do every single day. The second thing that I do is collaborate. And so I'm very big on collaborating. No one has ever accused me of being non-transparent, but I like to bring people in the room. I like diverse perspectives and opinions. And sometimes you might have heard the term devil's advocate. I like to use the term angel's advocate because there's a negative connotation there when you talk about devil. But my thing is, let's have constructive collaboration, not constructive criticism, but collaboration so that we can hear each other. And the active listening and collaboration build off of each other. And so these are things that I know that I practice with my staff. We get into a room, we meet once every week. I meet with certain people every day and I throw opinions out to them. Some people haven't been used to that, but I believe since I've been here for a year now, that they understand my leadership style and they're appreciative of it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. I like that constructive collaboration. That's a first for me. I'm definitely going to pocket that coming out of this. You've talked a little bit about the next question we had on our list about how you've handled conflicts with various stakeholders. Maybe let's dive into one specific example. You know, a lot of us in our chairs that are either business managers, associate ADs, CFOs, whatever it may be, you're constantly having to deal with cross-campus partners, right? Can you talk about an example about maybe how you've had to handle conflict and resolving that situation with a cross-campus partner?
So those are very unique situations because, you know, different campuses have different cultures. We are in a fortunate situation here where we actually have our CFO has been in place for about 2 years. Her number two, senior associate AD for finance, has been here for a couple of years. And I don't know if many other schools have this particular position, but we also have something called a university chief budget officer. So typically you might have one of those where you're dealing with the university CFO. Well, I deal with three of them on different occasions and they take the budget from different perspectives. So the chief university budget officer focuses on salaries and benefits. So every time we have a person that gets hired, you know, and I'm pretty sure some universities do this, they want you to hire this position at the same salary as the last position. And so I had to have very candid dialogues about that with that chief university budget officer, just to get her to understand how you can look at a CUHR, Coupa HR data sheet to figure out, you know, what the average salaries are. But at the same time, market doesn't dictate from that Coupa HR data sheet that we should be hiring an assistant AD for finance at $40,000. Now, you might map it differently, but let me tell you about our market. And so a lot of us have WinAD. We got a lot of other tools, salary surveys, things like that that we go to. Well, this particular person didn't want to look at any of that. She didn't care about it. And so I literally had to have meetings with them to have them understand this is what we need in order to be competitive. It's no different than a business that says you get what you pay for. And so when we started talking about these things, I think the collaboration and the consideration I had to do was make sure that any increase that was above the budgeted salary, that I found it somewhere else in our operating budget. And so I took that rule and I ran with it, which was good because we could find things and we got things taken care of because we were able to build it into the next year's budget. But I really found out that sitting down with her, having her understand how these things work, showing her a salary survey from our conference and why this wouldn't work, that really helped. And I find a lot of times people on campus, they don't know because they don't ask. And they sometimes don't ask because they loop or lump athletics in with the rest of the university. Because everybody always says that they're different. You know, the law school is different than the medical school, different than the school of veterinary science, different than athletics. Now, we all know that we are different. We move at a totally different pace than the rest of the university. These are the things that I spent the first 6-8 months here just laying that groundwork. And hopefully they understand that we move at a different pace. And so we just recently transitioned our head football coach, and I have a plan in place, and I've been developing this plan, without anticipating it was going to happen, but I've been working on it now for about 4 days. And there's a big communication plan, just to say, this is not the scenario we wanted at this time of year, but these are the things that we're going to have to do in order to make sure this transition goes smoothly. So I just find that over communicating and transparency with campus works. So, but I gave you the specific example and how we had to resolve that one as well.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think that's one of the things that I know, even in some of the conversations between Abe and I this year, what's been eye-opening for me is to hear the perspective of, a place like UCF where they're a separate athletic association, right? So like, how does that operate versus some of us that are in more of a public institution that are all part of that? So it's been intriguing just to hear the different perspectives. I mean, me personally, I've only worked at public institutions so far as well. So I think that's a good point about either way, regardless, being able to build strong cross-campus partners and being a collaborator is key to finding success in the long term.
And Kyle, I'll add to what you just said. There are, athletic associations, there are private schools, there are public schools, there are land grant institutions. And then Kyle, you just so happen to be in a commonwealth. Virginia is not a state, it's a commonwealth. And for someone that's worked in the state of Ohio, the state of West Virginia, and the Commonwealth of Virginia, I can tell you, they're totally different when you're in a commonwealth. So there's a lot of different rules that apply between private and public schools, but there's different things that apply between a commonwealth and a state. And I think we have three, maybe four commonwealths: Virginia, Kentucky, Massachusetts. I might be missing one. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, great point. Pass it over to Abe now for a couple questions in this topic as well.
Yeah, so Omar, how have mentors kind of influenced your approach or prepared you to handle conflict resolution kind of throughout your career as you've come up through the ranks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say that, as far as dealing with, as far as having mentors, that has been very key, in my career, as far as helping me develop. My first mentor, who I still keep in touch with to this day, is the former athletic director. I think he's athletic director emeritus at UVA, Craig Littlepage. And if you understand, your type of personality, and this is what I talked about, self-reflection, if you're more quiet and reserved and introverted, you might not want to go out and try to get, Deion Sanders to be your athletic director or be your mentor. It's not going to fit. And so I was able to have some really good mentors in my career, throughout my career, that, I didn't work with all of them, but they all had certain characteristics in their personality that they imparted upon me, nuggets of wisdom that I just put away and I held them, so when my time came to lead, not just, myself, but, a department, I knew what my value set was, and I took these small little nuggets and I just built upon them each and every time. So, and again, like I said, you learn what to do and what not to do. And so another big thing as far as mentors was, during my time at Cincinnati, I had 4 different athletic directors over a 9-year period. And so every one of them had different management styles. Some I learned what to do if I were to become an AD, and some I learned things that I would not do when I became an AD. But you take these mentors and you can find them, and you don't always have to have mentors that are above you. You can have mentors that are peers to you, but they are cross in another department or another area. So if you're an assistant AD for budget and finance, you could have, we can call it a peer relationship with, the assistant or the associate AD for facilities, because everything that happens in facilities, 90% of it is financial anyway. So things like that are very important to consider. And so just be mindful, when you go out and look for some of these mentors that are above you. I mean, a lot of people have very limited time. And so a lot of it may be upon you to seek out that relationship in order to build it. I'm very grateful because I had somebody that took me under my wing. And I do believe, I was on the front end of helping start this particular program with the deputy AD at Notre Dame, Yolanda Wells, and a couple of other people as well that were very instrumental in creating the MentorMe program so that we could do just that. So it's a very important thing that, in my opinion, a very important thing to have in your career, find and seek out mentors that you want to be alike or that align with your values, and just see what you can learn from them and go from there.
That's great. Yeah, I've tried to do that myself through here at UCF, but also through the program as well with Kyle. And we've had some great talks, and just picking up little nuggets here and there from him or people that I work with at UCF on a daily basis has been great for me and my career development. So kind of moving towards the business office lens specifically, Omar, how have you kind of weighed financial decisions or financial conflict where an expense may add value to a program or the overall department, but it wasn't necessarily a budgeted expense?
Basically, I just go to the athletic director and tell me what to do. But, on a serious note, that's part of what I do, and I've done it a long time throughout my career, is I'm really big as a CFO. And again, these are things that you learn along the way. And having sat in an athletic director chair, I do feel like I now have a really good perspective on what a athletic director needs on his plate and what I can handle based on my role. So I set those parameters early on, and basically a lot of these things that will come up that are unbudgeted, I try to weigh, the student athlete experience on this. I try to weigh the student athlete experience versus what the coach is telling me. So active listening is very important, because the coaches will come in based on their experience with a CFO or somebody else, or, one of my budget managers. So by the time it gets to me, the coaches are already in conflict mode, right? And so they're, I need to have this, and here's why. And so coaches are very, very good. They're very, very good at cloaking everything in the student athlete experience. And so I take a few different approaches, but specific lens that works for me is I always ask, if you had the money in your fundraising account, is this something you would take out of your fundraising account? And then if they don't hesitate, then I kind of really feel like it's a really good and justified reason, and I make them give me more documentation so that we can sit down and really explain it. But I've been here long enough to know that if a coach comes into my office and they want to do something and they want to do it right away, and I ask them questions and they're just like, this is time sensitive, my next line is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, an emergency on your part does not constitute a fire on my part. So sorry, we had a conversation within the budget meetings, leading up to our budget, and now here we are in August, and you're saying you missed this and you don't want to take it out of your budget. Not sure how we're going to resolve this unless we build it around next year, or you just reorganize your budget in the current year and put off some of the other priorities that you thought you had in the current year. So you quickly find that coaches will, if they really, really need something and they missed it because it's something that popped up that was not on the radar. We had a perfect example. We had we had a very expensive piece of equipment that broke during the summer, this past summer in July. And it was about $75,000 to replace. Well, university thresholds, you got to go bid, you got to do things like that. Our biggest thing was making sure when the students reported back in August that we had that piece of equipment. And so I asked the coaches, hey, look, you all have come to me and said that you're willing to do this. You want to do this, and it's absolutely necessary. And I said, if each of you contribute $2,500 from your foundation account, would you be willing to purchase this piece of equipment? And the answer was yes. So 6 coaches donated 25,000. So it ended up totaling $25,000, I think it was. So don't quote me on the numbers there. But $25,000 we ended up getting for a $75,000 piece of equipment. So it ended up working itself out, and the coaches were ecstatic about it. On the flip side, I had another coach that came to me and said they needed another, $50,000 for a charter flight. And I'm like, well, you got commercial flights already booked. Why would we want to do that now? Well, the game time changed. Like from what time to what time? It moved up from 7 to 4. I'm sorry, it moved up from 4 to 7. And now the commercial flights would have us getting back here at like 1 a.m. But if we take the charter flight, we can get back at 10 a.m. and get a good night's sleep. So I just kind of just smiled at the coach. And I said, how would you think the other programs that have the exact same situation would feel if I gave you $50,000? I'm not willing to open a floodgate for all these other coaches to ask for the same thing, because I know you all talk. So she didn't like the answer, but worked itself out.
Yeah, I think for me, even being young in the career, just starting out in this job, I've had some of those conversations a little bit with coaches and different people like that. And I think, like you said, when it comes to our kind of role and what we do, it can be a little bit heated at times, and it's kind of you have to balance the need and what they need with the department. So I'll pass it on to Kyle here for another question.
Yeah, thanks, Abe. And I think one of the things that Omar touched on there is I think about where this conversation will eventually lead into and career progression through some of conflict resolution is the constant theme that I heard there is like being really tight with your sport admins, right? I think that that's one of the things, whether you're in just a CFO seat or you're in a business office role, if you get an opportunity to eventually get involved with sport administration, I think from my experience being a sport administrator, my previous institution, and also here at UVA, it's invaluable. I think that what you learn is you start to hear the holistic conversation when you sit in those sport admin meetings, so that you're hearing a little bit more of like what Omar was pointing to when you are the AD and you're thinking about the holistic ecosystem of your athletics department. You're able to appreciate and understand when trying to make these financial decisions for the coaches, because they're going to come in, they're going to have grandiose ideas. But I think some things that I've even seen work against coaches, right, is if they're not aligned with their respective sport administrator, that's also a situation where it could backfire, right? Because if they're just saying, oh, yeah, we got to have this done, but the sport administrator said, whoa, 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 we didn't even have a conversation about that, it forces a dialogue between those two groups that ultimately gives you as the CFO or one of the financial decision makers in the process some CYA and back coverage, right? I think, and that's super important to me when I think about just having a really good sport administrator group, so that you can rely on them and feel like you can get support through that, and you're not on an island trying to make this decision by yourself.
So
Omar,
one thing I did want to add too, I know we didn't say this at the beginning, but if anybody had any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'd be more than happy to answer them too. I know we're about halfway through, but if you did have any questions, we'll definitely be willing to take those too.
absolutely. Yeah. Any Q&A that you have, we will definitely here in the next 10 minutes or so. Obviously, we can address it in real time if something pressing to that situation, but we will open it up to a Q&A session here around 1:45-ish. But please, as we're going through this, as Omar said, feel free to drop those in there and we'll grab them as we go. Kind of as we're wrapping up some of the specific conversation around conflict resolution, when you think about role specific insights, talk a little bit about your time when you were an AD, and we talked earlier about being really good with your cross-campus partners, but when you've maybe faced a conflict with campus leadership, such as the president, and how you navigated that situation.
Well, I will say, thankfully, I never really had any conflict with the president that I worked for. But there were times where the constructive collaboration did come into play. So I was an athletic director for 7 months at Campbell University, and then the pandemic hit. So a lot of things were a little bit different and weird because NCAA rules, playing, distancing, everything was just a little bit different. And so there might have been more conflicts with coaches who wanted to ignore some of the rules that were put in place, but the rules were basically put in place by the university, not athletics. And so we were able to work around some of those rules and have our teams play because we had testing supplies and things like that. But at the end of the day, there were some of our senior leaders that were also direct reports to the president who did not agree with that. And so the president and I actually had to sit down and align to make sure that things that we were doing were of the highest caliber, highest safety caliber, and we didn't put any more people at risk. And so it really worked out well for us because we played an abbreviated season of 4 games. I think from the time the football team reported to campus to the time we finished our 4th game, we had 2 positive tests and we were testing 3 times a week. So we did very well, and it just proved that, it could be done during that period of time. But basically, we had to over communicate with the staff and provide them with all of the weekly test results, not by student athlete, but just by numbers of positive or negative tests. And we got through it. But by and large, becoming an AD was a goal of mine. maybe not at that time because nobody really expected COVID to hit, but it is what it is. But I learned a lot and I take that experience with me now. And at the end of all of it, I do think, between active listening, collaboration, communication, things like that, conflict can be avoided with at least with the university cabinet or president.
Awesome. No, definitely can appreciate that. And that's a great example, thinking back to some of those COVID times and for some of us that were on executive staff and having to go through some of those exercises. I can only imagine what you were going through in the big chair, being an AD and being the ultimate decision maker and just, working through that with leadership on campus. I think that segues really nicely into the next section that we want to talk about with you and just career progression, right? So Omar, talk about some key strategies that have helped you advance in your career in athletics administration. Obviously, you just talked about, you had a goal of being an AD, but when you think about when you decide, when did you decide that was your goal, and then what helped you ultimately get there, and how do you think about career progression even now?
Great question, Kyle. And we got a question in the chat, and I'm going to combine that because I think that answer is really good. The question is, you were put in a situation where you had to take over the business office due to the boss leaving. What should the person be prepared for? So going back to 2009, I was the assistant AD at Cincinnati. I think within 9 months, the CFO ended up leaving. So I became the interim CFO. I didn't know what I didn't know because I went there to work for this guy and we were trying to build something. But being in there, one of the things that I did was I asked a lot of different questions to the people who were helping us across campus. So the controller became a good friend, the vice president for finance became a good friend, the university CFO, procurement, purchasing, all of those people were resources to me as I started to ask questions. And so the biggest thing for me during that career progression was doing the job that I was in very well. Wasn't really worried about, wait, am I going to become the next CFO? I just came in every single day. I struck the same nail. We had different problems, different issues that popped up. But I will say the one thing that I tried to do the most was understand what the athletic director needed and kept the day-to-day flowing. The biggest thing that I always do is I don't like messing with people's payroll. And so whenever somebody needs to get a bonus or they have an issue with their hourly paycheck, I was always Johnny on the spot to make sure that that got taken care of because people want fair pay for a fair day's work. So I always did that and I always answered questions related to that. The other thing that I did was I communicated with my peers and I communicated up very well. No one's ever accused me of not being transparent, but I ask them questions and they ask me questions. If I can't find an answer, if I don't have an answer, I'll tell them that I'll find it and I'll get back to them. So one of the things that I learned throughout my career, I have this 48-hour rule. And basically, if somebody sends you an email or leaves you a voicemail, I have a 48-hour rule that says you want to respond to everyone that sends you something within 48 hours. Obviously, I'm not worried about, the spammers from Exos Technology that's trying to upsell you on something. So no, not that. But when you have legitimate people that call you or leave you a voicemail or send you an email, even if I don't have an answer to their question, I'll respond and say, just wanted to let you know I'm in receipt of your email. I'm looking for an answer. I'll be back in touch with you in the next day or so. So those things I think have helped me throughout my career, being responsive. And I'm not saying that we won't miss an email here or there every now and then, because I know I get probably 150 emails a day. So I have to spend at least 2 hours going through and trying to prioritize that. But if you have a reputation as being, someone that is responsive, someone that listens, someone that is very knowledgeable about your job, then your next job will likely find you versus you going after it. And to the person who just had to take over a business office because your manager left, you know what? That's a situation that happens probably every so often in a lot of different places. I probably would not have progressed as fast as I did if I didn't have that. So use that opportunity to learn as much as you can. Again, be adaptable. Don't take anything personal. Do what you can do, and go from there. But I would also say if you have some people that you can reach out to and get advice from, please do that as well.
That's awesome. No, really appreciate that insight. And I know that's one of the things that, even as Abe and I's relationship has grown, is I think that that's a prime example of like how we lean on each other through the Mentor Me program, right? As being able to talk candidly about some of those situations, talk about career progression, be open in those conversations. Because once again, I'm a firm believer that, closed mouths don't get fed, right? So if you're not talking about it, if you're not thinking about it and how you're going to show up and be the best possible version of yourself every day, then you won't get there. So I think that's a really good point. Um, Anything from just, challenges or mistakes that you feel like you made through your career path, that maybe you could shed light on that maybe help someone as they're thinking through their career progression?
Yeah, so every day is not the same day in athletics. We all know that. And so a lot of times, we're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes, others have made mistakes. I do think that, owning up to the mistake and, moving forward, making sure it doesn't happen again is pretty big. But a lot of that also depends on the leader that you have. Um, Nobody's perfect. I mean, nobody's perfect. I mean, Jesus Christ was, but nobody else. So we're going to make mistakes, and the biggest thing is learning from those mistakes. And I'll give you an example. And so, heck, I don't even know which example to give you. I got so many. So, but again, that probably just tells you why I'm in the position I'm in. Um, but we had a situation back when I was at the University of Cincinnati. This was shortly after the former CFO left, and I was the interim. And by the way, I was interim for 14 months before I got the job permanently. So again, that just, just the time and dedication coming in and doing the job, eventually I proved that I could do it. But shortly after that time, there was a huge mistake that was made where someone basically went out and bought a $3,600 TV on a P card. And so we were down two bodies, long story short, the P card reconciliation didn't catch it until it went across campus for an audit. And so as they were doing this audit, they found it, and it just so happened to be, on my watch, even though I was in the interim seat for like 6 months. They found it and they wrote up this big article, in the audit reviews. You all have seen them, about the business office lacks institutional control. The coach was allowed to purchase a TV, and the TV didn't receive an asset tag, and the asset tag isn't there. And so I didn't know because the coach didn't sit in our building, number one. Number two, the P card in and of itself, I wasn't aware that a coach could go out and purchase that. So I kind of responded, not in a smart, actually, I did. So I just said, so the university has access to the CVV codes or whatever those codes are to control where coaches can actually purchase these items. I would, suggest, or my management response was I suggest you, limit these things to these specific coaches for these specific things for recruiting. And this is what they can do. They can't walk into Best Buy and buy a TV, and now you don't know where it is. And so I don't think they liked the answer because they responded back that I needed to go and find the TV and have the coach repay the money. But the problem was the coach had already left the university. Coach had gotten terminated and left the university. So that was just a nightmare of a mess that went on for better part of 6 months, going back and forth. But finally, a new athletic director came in and a new president came in, and they basically said, this has nothing to do with him. This was a lack of institutional control, not athletics. The coach got terminated for other reasons. So let's move on.
Well, hopefully at least the coach invited you over to watch TV on the big screen. Well, Abe, I'm gonna kick it over to you. How about you fire away with one more question in regards to career progression, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. We got a couple in the queue, so we'll be ready to go. So you guys start filling us up there. But Abe, why don't you round it out there?
Yeah, so as someone that's kind of early out in their career in college athletics, I've been in this role now full time for a year, or a little bit over a year now. kind of how do you balance excelling in your current role while also preparing for future opportunities and looking for that next job? Personally, I think this would be good advice for me, but also for some of the other mentor me pairs that are in this call.
So here's what I'll say. When I was younger, I was always, I would be in a job for a year and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to move. Let's go. Let's go. That was me. Um, but one of the things that one of my mentors told me was that do your job well and your next job will find you. And so that was like one of the most compelling statements to me because I'm looking at all these other people around me who are getting promoted and taking these jobs and they're moving up. And I'm like, man, I'm just being impatient. But that was probably the best advice that I ever got. Um, I remember I was at Hampton University when my mentor told me that. When he told me that, it wasn't even a year later that I ended up moving on to VCU. I was recruited to go to VCU. I left there because I was recruited to go to Cincinnati. I left Cincinnati because I was recruited to come to Virginia Tech. I left Virginia Tech because I was recruited to become an AD. And so every job that I had, I was never really looking for it. It kind of found me. I use CABMA as a platform because networking within CABMA is very huge because you never know who's going to become the next big CFO at some other school. And so if you get to the CABMA convention or you're in the MentorMe program or you can do other programming, get involved with the board, that's going to be very important because I think that's how we ended up moving up into different places. I got recruited to Cincinnati because the person I met, well, we met at the convention and they were one of the VPs of CABMA. We had a really good conversation. They really liked what I offered. And, for the first time, I left the East Coast and moved to the Midwest. It worked out because I stayed there for 9 years. But as far as excelling in your job, the biggest thing is understanding what you do. And again, I keep saying this, but do it well. I think in the business office, it is the best position in a college athletics department because 90 to 95% of all the decisions that are made are financial. Everybody has to come through the business office at some point for something. And then it's how you ask the questions that will help you get the information you need. So I learned about academics, compliance, sports medicine, sports information, marketing, all the other external units. I learned about all of these external and internal units because when they would come and we would have budget formulation, I would ask them questions. Why do you need this here? What are you looking to do? Can I see your plans? It was stuff like that that just helped me learn about how the other areas operate. And so I think I'm to the point now where if I get a sports budget and I see how they allocate their money, I can tell you exactly what their priorities are. I can tell you if a coach's priority is recruiting. I can tell you if it's team travel. I can tell you down to whether or not it's the hotel they stay in. Let's believe it or not, we got coaches that will go places and all they want to do is stay in Marriott's, not the Fairfield Inn Marriott, not the, no, that's a Hilton brand, I'm sorry, but they want to stay in Marriott's. And so instead of staying right where, there is an off brand of Marriott, they stay 45 minutes away in a Marriott that's, $199 a night versus the one that's $89 a night and you don't have the bus as far. So that's all that stuff. But this is where, when you try to manage doing your job and doing it well, just understanding all those little ins and outs, especially where the issues are. I think that we are problem solvers, but we're good problem solvers. So that's what we do on the business side.
Yeah, thank you for that. Kyle and I talked about that a little bit in our relationship and some of our meetings so far about kind of those type of things and then kind of managing up has been Kyle's big message to me and just, really knowing your job and doing it well, but also understanding how you can be valuable to your boss and your peers as well. So I think we'll go to the Q&A now. If you want to go there, Kyle, and kick it off with the first question from the Q&A.
Yeah, that works, Omar. So we've got someone in the chat that was asking about, how do you handle a situation where senior leadership is obviously pushing the business office for budget accountability, but doesn't always follow through with maybe the respective sport admin. Sport admin, of course, is like, I can't believe they're over budget, but at the end of the day, they try to force the coach and staff to come back to the business office to really manage that. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I didn't do well in those situations because I'm big on accountability. I'll tell you that right now. Sport administrators are in place for a reason. And part of that is to be have the accountability of the coaches to be able to stay within those guardrails. I know here at West Virginia, they do a really good job. Again, I came in, coaches would come and talk to me. And like I said, not my first rodeo. So I was actually able to go ahead and set the stage every time they said something. Have you talked to your sport admin? So I would always redirect them back to the sport admin. The sport admin would come and talk to me. That would give me an opportunity to open up to them. If I do this for this sport, look at this one right here, because this is kind of what we're dealing with. And so when there isn't accountability from my perspective, and I've had that at one location multiple times. But when there isn't accountability, I tend to go right to the athletic director and ask him, how do you want me to handle this? Because the sport administrator is not dealing with this. If you want me to handle it from a business office perspective, I'm just not going to process anything. And that's I'm not really going to not do that, but it's just a way to just get across to the AD that this is kind of where this scenario is. We got a sport with 4 months left and they're 150% over budget. So we got to get our arms around it, but the sport admin isn't addressing it. But at the end of the day, when that comes, something like that, I try to either get with my boss, if I'm reporting to the CFO, or if I am the CFO, I go right to the AD and I try to get them to understand the situation, because that's not a short-term problem. Chances are it's going to continue if you let it until it gets addressed.
Yep.
So once it gets addressed, I think that's a big thing for me. But like I said, accountability is something that I'm big on. And like I said, I didn't do well in those situations where it didn't happen. Let's just say, I mean, I'm pretty straightforward on that with coaches.
Yeah.
And so coaches either love me or hate me, but I will help you with a problem if you help me, but don't keep doing stuff that is wrong and then expect me to just let you keep doing it either.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think, one of the things that I hear from that, right, is you made the comment of, oh, well, I'm just not going to process anything, right? So we should write a book someday. What are some of the empty threats from the business office? So, oh, that might show up in an audit, right? You use that one a lot. Would you take it from your sport enhancement or your foundation account? Like that kind of stuff, like knowing and being equipped though from your seat of what are the sensitive subjects for them that's going to really make them make a hard decision and kind of force them into a corner of having to be accountable, right?
Right.
I think that it's doing it delicately and obviously promoting customer service through your efforts, but in a way where you're like, hey, I gotta cover myself here and make sure that if I was to make this decision for the other 23 sports that we got here, we would do it equitably as we're doing that.
Right.
Abe?
Yeah, so Omar, what to you are the most critical components in building or sustaining a healthy department or an ABO in general?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that I look for is people, a culture. You got to build a culture of excellence, and you got to have the right people around you. Um, I'm just reminded of, I've recently just hired an associate AD, but we went through the process. There was one person that I really loved. I wish I could have got her, but I couldn't because there were priorities there, which told me that, she would have been the right fit. But at the end of the day, I will never knock anybody for wanting to be around family or doing things the right way. But from a culture perspective, it would have been a plug and play. The person that I'm bringing in is going to be just as good, just not as seasoned, but I've already acknowledged that. So I'll have to do a lot more hand holding and coaching, which is fine. I'm getting too old to coach, but I can do it this time. I can do it one more time. I can do it one more time. So at the end of the day, I would say the biggest thing is the right people, the culture. You got to understand what motivates your people, and you got to be able to articulate that. If you're going after a job where you're going to report to a CFO, and so another big thing is you got to have the knowledge to do the job. Let's be honest with you. I mean, you don't want to hire somebody that can't work with a spreadsheet. But I'm big on culture, people that can work hard, people that understand, athletics is not a typical 9 to 5. Every day is going to be different, because we're going to spend a lot of time with each other, whether, here or whether you're at UVA or UCF, we're going to spend a lot of time within that department. And that's why I talk about accountability. I talk about collaboration, communication. all of those things are key because you don't want to come to work every day and have to take inhale, exhale, go there today, that sucks. And so I've been there, done that. But, I actually look forward to coming in every day because we got a really good staff. And I think I like to believe I have good rapport with coaches. I'm pretty sure there are a couple that don't like me because I don't give them everything they want. But I think that everything starts from there, understanding what you're looking for, the culture you're trying to build, and getting good people in place.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for that. Kyle, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that's kind of cool and full circle about that comment right there from Omar is when you think about what it takes to build a solid culture, not only within the respective business office, but within the department. I think to the same vein of what Omar mentioned earlier, where, just about every decision runs through the business office. That means that there's a lot of exposure and touch in your business office and how you promote yourself and your team's culture outwardly to the department. So you guys, whether you believe it or not, there's a path and a way in which you can impact the direct culture of your respective department. So I think don't ever forget that. Don't give up on that. That's important. And it's opportunities like this, the CABMA Mentor Me, going to CABMA, being a part of some of these professional development opportunities that allow you to build your network, to grow and learn, to be able to do that someday. And even as I think about just the small world of this, right? Like I just had to hire an assistant AD, and I don't know if this is the first one ever, but I was able to luckily go out and hire someone that was a part of this Mentor Me program, right? So it's through those relationships and through this network that allowed us to find someone who ultimately shined and was the best candidate for the interview committee, and we got to hire him. So I think that goes a long way towards building that culture and building out a strong team, because that's what people want to come in and be a part of, because you got to spend 40 plus hours a week with these people, right? You don't want to be beside a bunch of people that you can't stand. So next question, Omar. Might be wrapping it up here pretty soon. I know we're almost at the hour, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Could you speak to transitioning and leadership of a business office as a newly hired CFO or business manager, and conflicts therein that you may have to manage with the staff already in place? So thinking about you inheriting a staff, right, that isn't yours, you're new in a management role, and having to manage some of that conflict.
Yeah. So one of the things I did here was try to take time to find out, what the staff was like, what are their goals, what are their aspirations, are they in the right, are they on the right seat on the bus, basically, because we had a few people that were here, and there were some people that had more capacity than others, and I just wanted to try to even that out. So I basically spent a lot of time not just quizzing individuals across campus about athletic strengths and weaknesses. I also talked about, where do you see anything that needs improvement within the department? And so that allowed me to be able to focus on certain areas of responsibility. I will say this. So when I got here, there's this management tool. It's a wonderful thing. It's called a performance improvement plan, AKA the PIP. And so coming in as a new CFO or a new leader, some of the conflicts you might have to manage are people adjusting to your leadership style, or people adjusting to the fact that you might be younger than them or older than them and they know more than you. So you really can't get into people's heads. That's why you have to really look at the management tools that you have in order to manage that conflict that's there. And so if there are solid examples where the employee is deficient in certain areas, or things are being missed, or they're not being responsive, or they have a bad attitude, these are all things that can go into a PIP, because the longer it goes on, the expectation that it's going to get better is a false hope. I've been around long enough to know that that doesn't happen. And the sooner, there is they can either self-select out, or, you got to move forward. Even if they are a key constituent, you got to make sure that you're not being sabotaged. But at the end of all of it, you got to manage that. You got to manage that as best you can by looking at performance and making sure that the expectations that you have are being met.
Thank you, sir. No, totally makes sense. Abe, we got one more in there. We want to wrap up there, and we'll kind of finish and send it over to Caitlin to send us all home here.
For
Okay.
sure, yeah. So for someone not in a leadership role, Omar, When you're joining a business office and you're discovering kind of a rift or divide in the department, what is the best way to handle that?
That is a good one because it's not someone that's in a leadership role, right? Okay, so yes, if you're not in a leadership role and you're discovering that that is the rift, one thing that I would suggest is asking the supervisor about, how is our culture? How is our business office? How do we work? And, depending on what they say, if it's not aligning with exactly what you are observing, then there's probably a lack of leadership, or at least, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, a lack of trust. Because if the leader is thinking one thing and the employees are thinking something else, then again, that there's something going on with the leader that's there. Now, this is where you gotta, manage or not even get involved with office politics, because then it becomes, I'm on your side, not their side. And then the rift is not going to do anything but become a chasm. So that's the best advice I can give if you're trying to manage up. I'm pretty sure there are other techniques to deal with that, but without knowing exactly where it is it below you? And are you in the middle? And then there's a CFO, or is it flat? And it's with, employees number 2 and 3 that don't like each other, and you're number 1 and number 4. So it's stuff like that, without knowing, I would just get a sense from the CFO or the leader of the business office, what their take is on the culture of the business office. And if what you're seeing is not aligning with what they're saying, then like I said, there's probably a communication/trust issue going on.
Awesome. Well, Omar, thank you so much again for your time. I know we're going to kick it over to Caitlin here to wrap us up, but thank you for this conversation and this dialogue. Great. I think it's super beneficial to be able to hear from someone with so much experience in the industry and at a diverse amount of different levels. So thank you sincerely for that. And Abe, thank you as well for being such a great mentee and letting me listen and learn how to lead better through you. So, Caitlin.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Kyle. Thank you so much, Omar. I know I took a lot of notes for myself, so I know our audience did as well. And big thanks again to Kyle and Abe for stepping up. Current MentorMe pairing that's getting this opportunity to interview Omar. Just wanted to talk about a couple few takeaways I had that really stood out to me. I know early on we talked about active listening, collaboration. I really liked what you said about constructive collaboration and that idea of an angel's advocate. Bringing other people into the room, having those diverse thoughts so that you can get everybody on the same page and think about things that maybe you weren't thinking of. What I really love too is do your job well and your next job will find you. I know early on I suffered from, okay, what's next? But always doing your job well and doing it to the best of your ability and being where your feet are. I think that advice is gonna, is so good for everybody, no matter where they're at in their career. And then using CABMA as a platform. So you segued it perfectly for this MentorMe program, getting involved in MentorMe and then finding ways to network within CABMA. That's how we all have been connected. And I know we'll stay connected through that. And then lastly, building a culture of excellence with the right people. So we're all here to, serve our student athletes and serve our coaches. But if we're not doing it with the right people who align with our values, we're not going to be able to serve them. So I appreciate all these insights that you shared. It was great, no doubt. And then just to wrap us up, wanted to remind everybody the MentorMe program applications are currently open. The link was dropped in the chat, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or a member of the lead team. They will be open until December 15th. I know whether you're a protege or a mentor, you will no doubt get a benefit from this program. I know as being a protege and a mentor myself in the past, I was able to learn at both levels, and we currently learn from each other too. We learn from these programs. We learn in our other programs, our other breakouts that we do together. So I know it'll be a great experience. If you haven't been part of our program before, please join it. So with that, I'll leave everybody with, I hope you have a great holiday season. Hope you have a great holiday break. Enjoy the rest of December and Happy New Year. Thanks again, Omar, Kyle, and Abe.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Be well.